And we're live streaming with Living My Alaska. Greetings from Alaska. My name is Bennett, and I have a really special guest with me today, a real man. His name is Mr. Mike Richter, and Heroes Forge is the name of his channel. Mike, please tell us more.
Absolutely. So at the Heroes Forge, we believe that men want to be heroes and women want to be with heroes, and that men are developed and grown into heroes through overcoming the challenges that beset them day in and day out. And by overcoming incrementally more difficult challenges, they become stronger and worthy of carrying themselves and the torch of masculinity to create strong families, to create an amazing life, and to go ahead and be of use to other men in the society. At the Heroes Forge, we believe that masculinity is a gift and it is something to be cultivated. We go ahead and cultivate it primarily through the 3 M's. That is cultivating your mind, your muscles, and your money. And what we go ahead and focus on at the Heroes Forge is building on masculine strength, cultivating solid dating and marriage relationships, cultivating a brotherhood of men that you can depend on and that you can go ahead and serve side to side with. And we go ahead and also touch on physical and mental health, along with financial strength.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I love that. There's so many key words in there. There's strong family and what women want. Women want to be with men, right? This is what women want.
Right.
And the triple M, mind, money, and so on. That's really good stuff. I love that.
Yeah. And the thing is, though they may not admit it to themselves, you don't watch their word, or you don't listen to the words. You watch their actions and their behaviors. Yeah. You find out who they are with and not who they say they want.
Boy, that's something, isn't it? Let me, I'll tell you, if you're new here, and most of our viewers are, I'll tell you a little bit about Living My Alaska. Living My Alaska is a backcountry lifestyle channel based in the stunningly wild, shockingly beautiful, but often deadly place that we call home. It's how we hunt, harvest, homestead, and adventure our way through the great land. We're driven by our commitment to faith and the love of freedom. We're old souls living in the new world, seeking a refuge in what is still considered the last frontier. We created Living My Alaska to bridge the gap between the dream of Alaska and the harsh realities of this kind of lifestyle. We hope to inspire others to seek out a different kind of existence, but more importantly, it is our intent to empower others through information about how to turn that dream into your reality. I can tell you, Mike, over the years, I've joked with friends and my wife that we committed career suicide to live this life, but it's the best thing we ever did. And if you're watching this and you're ready to make a change in your life and you want a different trajectory, this is the place for you. And this is definitely the podcast and the topic and the video for you.
Absolutely. So today we're going to go ahead and get into 3 cornerstones of masculine development. Those are confidence, risk, and commitment. Each of those things is worthy of its own podcast in and of itself. But today we're going to go ahead and try to do each of the topics justice, because I think this is a lot of carryover between the 2 of our channels. And though you go ahead and come at these from a more outdoorsy, like frontier, like perspective, I think that there is a lot of commonality and common ground here, because I know that there's a lot of men out in the concrete jungle that wish they were in the wilderness. And sometimes they need to go ahead and figure out for themselves whether they have it to test their mettle against the elements. And sometimes it's not for the faint of heart. And I'm sure you'll be able to go ahead and tell us a lot more about that.
Taking risk of any kind, whether it's the concrete jungle or the hill country of Texas or the backcountry of Alaska in sub-zero, it's not for the faint of heart. If those with weak constitutions, or those, in my opinion, that go to a rally and fall into their friends as if that's some kind of risk where there's no risk involved. Those who go to some place where they teach you to walk across hot coals and not burn your feet, there's not risk in that. These people are never going to let you set yourself on fire. Real risk is when you put yourself out there to ask a woman on a date, right? Right? Yeah, fair enough. Real risk is joining the military at 17 years old when your mom has to sign off on it, and not knowing where they're going to put you or what they're going to do with you, completely submitting yourself to something else more powerful than you. right? Real risk is becoming a Christian man and accepting the accountability that goes with that. Real risk is having a family. Fair enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're right on the
So,
mark with that.
yeah, please. So you want to, there's, oh, by the way, let's make a quick shout out to some early joiners here. Mr. Bill at My Alaska is with us. And Bill, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. Let us know if you have any problems on your end with video and audio. So Mike, lead us off into the first topics, please.
Yeah, sure. Let me go ahead and give a little bit of background so that your people know a little bit more about me as a person, and then maybe I can go ahead and ask you a little bit about your background so that my people can go ahead and know more about you and the amazing background that you've lived. All right. So I went ahead and joined the Air Force at the age of 20. I joined not for patriotic reasons or for education reasons. I joined because I needed a solid job to go ahead and raise a family on. I had committed to my bride-to-be at the time that I would go ahead and be the sole provider and to give her the ample space to go ahead and be a stay-at-home mother for her to go ahead and raise our children in the Lord. And so up until I joined the military, I had not yet acquired the knowledge, skills, abilities, and talents to be a one-person household. And so I was just very thankful for the opportunity to join the Air Force and to have done so many things to make that a reality for my family. Once I retired in 2017, I went ahead and opened up a couple of businesses. While I was in the Air Force, I was investing in real estate for the last 6 years of my enlistment. And once I retired, I had a lot of time on my hands. So I decided to go ahead and go full-time on real estate investing. Went ahead and amassed a portfolio of single family homes, and then ended up buying a commercial strip center and then an apartment complex. And then we also, now we're in our 8th year of owning our local game store, which is the largest game store here in town. We have the largest singles inventory of Magic the Gathering cards in West Texas. So it's pretty crazy. But those are the things that we have done during my adult life. And we can go ahead and dive into that in another time in another place. But I'd love to know a little bit more about you. Can you go ahead and give me a brief background and synopsis of what you had going on?
Yeah, it's a varied and storied, background. Because this is a limited podcast, we won't get too much in the details, but the background looks like this. My name is Bennett. I grew up in South Louisiana and on a rice farm between the swamp and the bayous of South Louisiana to what's deep in what's considered called Cajun country. That's old historic area where they still speak a dialect of French that is no longer spoken anywhere on the planet. My parents spoke French before they spoke English. My father was a rice farmer for many years. As a kid, I was made to get up, before I went to school in the morning and shovel and clean out hog pens, right, and things like that. And I watched my father and all the men work really hard on that farm. And at a very young age, I saw what real men did and what real work looked like. And I think that taught me an ethic early in life. I was raised Catholic, and I'm still Catholic, but when I decided a long time ago I was going to college, right? There's one thing my parents did, and they showed me what work looked like. And I had a decision to make whether I wanted to do that or I wanted to go to college. And I decided I was too pretty to work on a rice farm, so I was going to go to college. No, truthfully, my parents, like so many farms in the late 70s, early 80s, my parents tragically lost their farm, and it threw me into a whirlwind. And it was a big time reality check for me, because I had to go to the city then and face the realities of the real world. And my father did the best thing he did for me is he drugged me into the oil fields of South Louisiana. And there's one day I tripped on an oil rig that I wasn't supposed to be on in the first place. And when I put my hand on the oil rig, it burned my hand. And I looked at that and thought, I'm going to college, because my attitude was the worst day in a college library full of other pretty college girls is better than the best day out there. And so, I have so much respect for the people that do that work and do that lifestyle. It wasn't for me. And so somehow I finagled my way into Wall Street. After graduating college, I worked for a couple of the big banks as a stockbroker and as a banker. Spent 5 years doing that. And I realized that was a long way. New York City financial district was a long way from the South Louisiana rice farm. And my culture and my value system didn't really jive with that industry. So I made some changes. I pivoted in my late 20s. I pivoted to something else, got into medical sales. And so it was my job to stand right next to a neurosurgeon or a spine surgeon or an orthopedic surgeon while we're doing 8-hour surgeries on somebody's back. It was bloody, it was gory, it was intense, it was stressful. But I learned a lot. And somehow I finagled that turned into an opportunity to go overseas and work in product development. So one of the doctors hired me to go overseas, and my wife and I lived in a beautiful, exotic little town in Switzerland called Davos, and we got married there. And I spent every other week on a transatlantic flight somewhere meeting with the doctors where we were developing the newest technology for the next technology rollouts and procedures of spine surgery. And it was a tremendous experience. I mean, if you name a famous city in Europe, I've been there. And that's how we did that. But there was one day I'm flying over in the Swiss Alps, and I looked out at the beautiful Swiss Alps, and I thought, gosh, if I had a parachute, I'd jump out. And I realized that my heritage and my culture and my, I guess you could just say genetics, was not conducive to that lifestyle. I was thankful for what I was doing, but it was not where I belonged. And
Awesome.
so I came home from work one day and I told my wife, I said, I see you're dying on the vine out here. My wife is one of those that likes to work. Dawn is a registered nurse, and she has tremendous pride in her career. And so I looked at her and I told her, I said, my commitment is to you and my marriage, not this job. Let's go home. And so we went from transatlantic flights, first class plane tickets around the world, 5-star resorts, having the Queen's beef in her private dining quarters, truly in London. We went from that to a 1-bedroom apartment and shopping at Goodwill, literally career suicide. And that's when I started doing some teaching and business consulting, and that ramped up. Dawn's career took off. And that was over a decade ago. Somewhere in there, I started watching TV shows about Alaska, and I realized we need to make another change. And that's how we ended up in Alaska. And when we moved to Alaska, we didn't move to the city, we moved to the backcountry. And it's been like that ever since. And it's the best thing I ever did for my wife, for my life, for my marriage, and my health. And that's my background. And that's what drove us to start Living My Alaska. We want to show other people that if you were like me, if you've got a necktie on today and you're stuck in a traffic jam, and that's not for you, you can make a change, but you better be willing to take the risks like we did. And I hope that helped.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that, Bennett. We got a question from Just Eric. He asked, do you work with neuromonitoring? He used to do that. Now he's a software engineer.
That's cool. Yeah, Eric, we did a lot of neuromonitoring. It was my job to work right next to those people. Part of the package we offered to some of the surgeons and the doctors were neuromonitoring services. So yeah, we did some of that. That was a long time ago. I imagine the technology has changed tremendously since, a decade ago.
Awesome. So let's go ahead and hit up our first topic, which is confidence. So I believe that confidence comes first from competence and from putting in the reps, because over time, you will go ahead and find a challenge and accomplish it over and over again to the point where it becomes normal. And then at that point, you're confident at that level. And then you need higher and higher challenges to increase in competence in any arena or endeavor in life. What are your thoughts about confidence?
Yeah, I assume that comes from your Air Force and military background, right? Because from what I understand, although I don't have a military background, from what I understand, that's how it works, right? They give you a little bit of responsibility, and if you do well, they give you more. And if you do well, is that correct?
Yes, that's more or less the case. When you go ahead and show yourself to be competent, your plate gets loaded. And if you show yourself to be incompetent, then you're no longer upwardly mobile, but you get to go ahead and participate. You get your participation trophy, and that's about it.
Yeah, I think, and I've seen that, that's absolutely true. I've seen, so as a business, so by the way, somewhere in there, I spent 10 years teaching business, marketing, finance, entrepreneurial endeavors, writing business plans. And I did quite a bit of coaching, business consulting for small and medium-sized businesses. And we did a lot of that, talent acquisition, talent retention, talent training. And so confidence was a major part of that. I can tell you by my own experience, Alaska was extremely intimidating. Watching the TV shows was one thing. I've always been an outdoorsman. I've always loved to hike and camp and hunt, but Alaska was a completely different game. And the first time I stepped into the woods in Alaska, I realized this was way above my skill level. So I didn't just go in all, just blazing. I started with, listen, I grew up in the deep South. Right. I'd never lived in a snowy environment. I had no concept of how to dress, what clothes to buy, what foods to take, how to keep my water from freezing, all of that stuff, how to survive in sub-zero conditions. I had to learn all of that. And I didn't really have anybody that was willing to take me out. There's one thing about old Alaskans, they're not real eager to take newcomers out. And now I know why.
Sure.
But my confidence level is still, even after a decade, I'm still building that confidence level. And I've certainly pushed myself to the limits a few times. I almost lost my life, almost fell off a mountain goat hunting once. I've had 2 attacks by black bears that I've had to stop. I've survived a moose attack, right? And that just comes with the realities of higher and higher levels of confidence. So I think confidence comes when you are smartly doing your homework first. You have the basic knowledge, then you go test that knowledge, and then you learn what mistakes you've made, and then you do it again, and then you do it again.
Yeah, so it sounds like you're taking on incrementally larger challenges, and you're making preparations for those challenges appropriately.
Oh, absolutely.
And then when you go ahead and find that the challenge either exceeds or is different from what you've prepared for, that you go ahead and make an intelligent assessment of what those differences are, and you change course appropriately.
There's one thing, yeah, and I agree with that. And I'm sure you've seen this in business, and I've certainly seen it in the backcountry of Alaska. There's one thing that is guaranteed, and that is it's not going to go like you think. You cannot script you cannot script a backcountry adventure effort no more than you can script your business on how it's going to go. You can write a business plan, right? You can easily write a business plan for a business, but it's never going to go like you expect. That's okay. And it's the same thing for the backcountry of Alaska. You can write an agenda of what you plan on doing, but there are so many elements that are out of your control, and the confidence level comes when you've done it before and you prepared for it as best you can. And that really helps.
Awesome. Got a question for you. What do you think is one of the key things that undermines confidence in men today?
I can tell you what undermines confidence for me.
Okay.
I've joked with my wife that finding a hunting buddy in Alaska is harder than finding a wife.
That's interesting.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I see your eyes on that one. Oh yeah, it's absolutely true.
Okay.
I've been with the same woman for over 20 years. And I told her, we've been married for, I don't know what, a little over a decade of that 20 years. And I told her, I said, I was married to you the day I met you. I just got the paper a few years later.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. It's one thing to sit around a table and have a beer and some chicken wings and everybody talks tough when you're watching hunting on TV and everybody's perfectly comfortable. It's another thing when you go into the backcountry of Alaska and the wind starts to blow and the rain hits you sideways and it's ice cold and it comes down the back of your neck. You haven't slept last night because things were moving around in the bushes. The tent is shaking. You're cold. You're wet. You're hungry. You're tired. Then the real man comes out, or the lack thereof. And the ones that, and out there, your hunting buddy could keep you safe or get you killed.
Absolutely.
And it's absolutely true. And we've seen that over and over again, where tragic stories about Alaska happen because buddies go out together and they have no idea where they're getting themselves into. And when things start to crumble, they start to turn on each other and leave each other in bad situations. And that happens quite a bit, and it's tragic. And that's what I've learned is I've decided it's safer to go into the backcountry alone, which is a terrible thing to do, than it is to take someone who, number one, doesn't respect the law, number two, doesn't respect Alaska. I told my wife, I told Dawn, I said, I category Alaskan men or men in Alaska in 3 categories: the ignorant, the arrogant, or the meek. And I think I shared that with you, meek, the biblical sense of meek. The ignorant are the ones, and ignorant, we consider ignorant like this insulting term. It's not. It means you don't know, right? The ignorant are the ones who watch way too many meat eater TV shows or whatever you want to watch on TV and think it's anything like that and think they're prepared. And they come to Alaska without doing any more homework. The arrogant are usually the old timers that have been around forever. And I know many of them, and they say, oh, Bennett, I've done it this way forever. It's not a problem. Except if you listen to them long enough, and if you give them a little bit of whiskey and they really start to talk, you'll find out it hasn't been okay over the years that they've done it this way. and they've put themselves and others in grave danger. Not to mention they may not follow the law, which is another problem. And then there's the third category, which is the meek and the humble. And that is you have a healthy respect for whatever that is you're doing, whether it's learning to fly an airplane, whether it's shooting rifles, or hunting and fishing or adventuring in Alaska. You got to respect that environment or it will punish you.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to go ahead and piggyback on the idea of biblical meekness, I think that a lot of times people go ahead and misuse that word. And it doesn't mean to go ahead and be weak or to go ahead and be in the corner. The idea is that it is a sword within its sheath, that it is dangerous, but is under control. And I think that far too few men go ahead and recognize this. I think a lot of men in society today would prefer to portray themselves as lambs than as lions. And I think that it is important to go ahead and have the capacity to be violent when it is appropriate and keep it under control for civil society.
The appropriate amount of something like violence to achieve the result you want, whether it's to protect your wife, protect your property, or protect yourself. I see someone named Ched Dizzle has a comment. He said, I'd add cautious. I'm not meek. Yeah, I know, Ched. And then right after you posted that, then Mike defined what we mean as meek. And it has nothing to do with being cowardly or anything else. It's quite the opposite. Meek, in a simple sense, is courage and power under control. Quite nothing like being cautious, right? You know your limitations. That's exactly correct. Whether it's outdoors in Alaska or, just whatever you're doing that's risky. Yeah.
Yeah. And I would call that wisdom. I would definitely say that knowing the left and right boundaries of what your capabilities are is incredibly wise to do. Now, going back to what you were talking about, how like you would prefer to go out in the backcountry alone rather than with somebody. I think this goes ahead and speaks a little bit to the idea of mentorship, which I think has gone by the wayside in today's society, where I think that there's a lot of value in taking somebody who is ready and up for the task of learning and know that he cannot be fully depended on for like your safety as an equal partner, right?
Oh, yeah.
And know that you guys are not on equal footing, but to build him up so that at some point down the road, he can become an equal partner to you.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think a good example is I have a good friend that's an adventure guide, outdoor adventure guide, and a master guide, hunting guide in Southeast Alaska. And he's been doing it all his life. And he's forgotten more than I'll ever know about that lifestyle, right? But every time I go with him, I realize how incompetent I am compared to him, right? And he doesn't make me feel that way. I just see it. I see it in everything he does. But he also does some things that freak me out sometimes because he's been doing it so long. He says, well, I've done it this way for 30 years. It's never been a problem. For example, I never step foot in the backcountry of a lot. By the way, I live in the backcountry. So technically, I don't walk out of my front door without a firearm, in this case, a pistol. But just for many reasons, right? If you get in trouble, nobody's coming for help for you because of where we live. And I see my friend that's a master guide go running around in bear country, staring at 9 bears in this mud flat, and he never carries a pistol. He'll have his rifle sometimes, and I'm thinking, dude, but again, I wouldn't dare tell him otherwise. I've questioned him on it, and he said, "This is how I do it." All right. Yeah, I'm taking my pistol, just whatever, man. So, but you see, the point is it's being cautious in business or in life or in the backcountry is work. It slows everything down. Yeah, Chad has another. You want to ask that? Chad Dizzle has another question for us.
Sure. He says, "Is it true that when hunting browns, the guide has to back the hunter's shot?"
I don't think so. Well, you'd have to ask the guide that. I think so. What Chad's asking, when hunting brown bears in Alaska, does the guide have to back the hunter's shot? It would be wise that the guide is ready and willing to stop the world's largest land predator from tearing your guts out and eating you while you watch. That's the reality of it, right? So any good guide is going to be ready to stop that bear if you miss or if you make a bad shot. And by the way, even if you make a good shot, listen, folks, it's the world's largest land predator by far. It's twice the size of an African lion, and it's got a way nastier attitude. And you don't hunt brown bears. You don't hunt bears at long range. They're close in, 100 yards, right? Now back to this topic of courage and and competency. So when you take that shot, he's not like on the TVs. He likely is not going to drop. I've never seen one just fall. Sometimes they run straight at you, and
Sure.
they're on their way to being dead. But in the next 30 seconds to 45 seconds, he can take you out in the process. So the guide in that place. But this is not about a hunting channel. This is about. But the point is, I mean, that is a great example of real fear, real risk, right? Real risk and competency and commitment save the day.
Yeah, absolutely. So one quick thing on confidence before we move on to risk. Can I go ahead and ask you about how to recalibrate your body and your mind when you feel like you've hit the edge of your capability?
Yeah. I have to tell you, every backcountry. So, 15, 20 years ago, my wife and I were big time cyclists. And we used to go out and do 100-mile bike rides at a time, and through the heat of Texas, by the way, sometimes. And I always thought, when my butt starts to hurt, my legs ache, I'm tired, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, 75 miles into that, I'm thinking, what am I doing? I'm not doing this again. And every time, 24 hours after getting home, getting some food, having a shower, having a night's sleep, I'm planning the next Sufferfest. And it's the same thing and it's always been a source of frustration for me. I was like, why do I do this? And I know why, because we're pushing the boundaries, and that once we achieve that 100-mile mark, it's like, all right, we're doing 200 next time. Whether it's hunting in Texas or going out in the backcountry of Alaska, it's the same thing. Every time I go out and I freeze my butt off, and I've got almost frostbite on my toes, and a bear tries to eat our food out of the tent, and all this type of stuff, I think, I just want to get out of here. I'm just ready to go home. But as soon as I'm home, sometimes I'm not even home yet, and I'm already planning the next Sufferfest. So I think it happens when you push right on the edge of that boundary, but you see something of success. And in a hunting situation in Alaska, success is not you've taken an animal home to eat it. Success is you survived the adventure. You've had a fantastic trip. You've had great fellowship with brothers in Christ. Or in this case, if I take my wife hunting, I know I have two choices. Here's what's going to happen. If she has a good time, I've got a hunting buddy for a decade. If she's miserable, I'm going to be shoe shopping for the next 10 years of my life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And isn't that fair about sons? And we weren't blessed with children, but wouldn't that be the same case with kids?
Kids are an interesting beast. I tell you what, they go ahead and push your limits one way or the other. And just seeing how they go ahead and interact with the world around them and look at things with fresh eyes, sometimes it goes ahead and gives me a little bit of hope for the future in a lot of ways. It's just that being untainted by the society as we have it today, because we homeschool our kids and we do our best to keep them away from a lot of the just ridiculousness out there and give them a healthy dose of what to expect when they get out there, so that they can have the competency and the confidence to face the challenges that'll be before them.
So let's wrap up that as confidence. Maybe this way is the answer with confidence is, like you said in the beginning, it's slow increments of the taste of success. That's the kicker, right? If you're doing slow increments and it's always failure and always miserable and there's no hint of anything positive, you'll never do it. That goes from diet to we see a lot of people come to Alaska, and one bad winter, they're out of there. What I've told many people is, give it a couple years. Maybe you'll see something different. They're gone. They're back to Florida or back to Texas or whatever. Slow incrementals of positive outcomes. It doesn't all have to be positive, because it generally never is, but a little bit of taste of success, and man, you want more and you want more and you want more.
Yeah. So we went ahead and hit up confidence pretty well. So let's go ahead and move into the idea of risk. And the way that I typically will frame risk is the idea of having a potential reward, being exposed to something, and there being a vulnerability associated with that exposure. How does that go ahead and grok with the wild frontier of Alaska?
Say those again, please, because there's a lot there.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, risk is potential reward, and then exposure, and then a vulnerability that comes as a result of that exposure.
Yeah, the only thing I would add on the back of that is some taste of reward at the end. But yes, risk is you get nothing in life without risk. You'll never become wealthy without taking risk. You'll never become You'll never run a marathon without taking risk, right? You'll never
Right.
become a business owner. You'll never find a world-class wife without taking some risk.
Yeah.
You would, I mean, you'll never be able to say like you that I served my country for almost 20 years like you did without taking first that risk, because there's this thing called stolen valor, right? It's a major problem.
Sure. And just to clarify, I was
Yeah.
medically retired at 12 and a half years. I don't want people to go
Okay.
ahead and get
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
got blown
Okay. All right.
I got blown up in Iraq. And so
Yeah.
complications from that led me to go ahead and have to retire early. So I
Fair
don't want to
enough.
go ahead and get anybody confused. There is no stolen valor here. I know where I'm at, and that's just what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. The point, and stolen valor is related to the military, but I see that throughout our society where someone, let me give you an example. Participation trophies, I think, are a great example of how to shirk a risk and reap the reward, right? And I'll tell you this, in the world of like long distance cycling, there's this thing called a century. That means the first time you ride 100 miles is a major. Look, the first time I rode 30 miles on a bicycle, I called everyone I knew. I was so excited. That when you ride, there are very few people who've ever ridden 100 straight miles on a bicycle, right? It's called a century. Well, then they started doing something called a metric century. Well, it's not really a century. It's a metric century, which is about 65 miles.
Okay, for kilometers. Got it.
Yeah, it's kilometer. It's kilometers, right? Well, we still use freedom units on this side of the ocean. It's called miles. Well,
sure.
Right. But then and I joke with my wife all the time is a half marathon, then it's a quarter marathon. I'm like, okay, I'm going to walk around the block. I'm going to run, a 2/10 of a marathon. Right. Come on.
Yeah, but if you take that in reverse, there's something there, right? The idea that, sure, those are not monumental achievements, but I think that they are internal achievements in the adventure of getting to the real thing. And so long as people are going ahead and working towards the real thing, I think that there's no issue in celebrating milestones. I think that is a healthy thing to do. Right?
Yeah, because I agree. In the real world where I'm from and where you're from, words mean things. The word marathon means marathon. There's only one marathon, and it's a marathon. There's only one way to ride a century, and that's if you ride a century, right? 100 miles is 100 miles. And what we've discovered is, and we know this from the business coaching and the teaching I did, is if people say I'm on a diet, their brain gets the same firing of the neurons as if they actually are on a diet. Right.
That's interesting.
And so what we see many people do is the reason someone say, in my mind, someone says the reason I'm saying I ran a half marathon, as opposed to saying, I ran 5 miles in training for a marathon, is because I ran something marathon, except you didn't. Right.
Sure.
And that's my problem with it. So risk. So the thing is there's, and we see this as a stockbroker and as a banker, 20 years ago, we see this as risk is something that a modern American society doesn't embrace. Right. I saw so many clients say, well, what can I put my money in that it's not going to be risky, but I'm going to make some. And the correct answer to that is nothing.
Right.
Nothing. As a matter of fact, you think putting it in a coffee can under the bed is not risky, except it's the most risky thing you can do ever.
Absolutely.
Because of deflation or inflation, right? So you see my point. There's no.
I think it's interesting that you brought up the idea of retooling language. And I think that one thing that really would encapsulate that is the idea that by changing the standard, you cheapen the achievement.
Well said. Yes. Changing the standard, you cheapen the achievement. So college, I spent 6 years in college. Was it worth it? I don't know. But I saw that. I got my MBA and I was super proud of that. I was the first male in my family ever to go to college and finish college. And I was super proud of that. But over the years, the MBA can be had from institutions where you never have to go to the college. And in my mind, it cheapened what I had earned. And I was very upset about that when I saw that over the years, because it's not the same thing, right? It's not the same thing as the grueling. So that, the language gets changed quite often. Here's what I'll say about risk is there's so many times that people want to live like Switzerland, right? Where neutral, everything's neutral. No, and in this world, there's no more neutral. Right. So if you don't want to take the risk, you don't reap the reward, period. There's no other way. You either take the risk and take the chance of failure, or you don't. And there's no way to shirk that. By the way,
interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
can I go ahead and chime in on what you said about MBAs and like
Yeah.
other people and the way that they did it? So I don't think that cheapens by any stretch of the imagination what you had achieved. They had acquired something by different means that was not the same as yours. It was not equal to yours. I think a lot of times people use equality to go ahead and mean very different things, whereas the way that I'm using it is the same. Your challenges that you faced in your graduate program was not the same challenges as they faced. And so your reward is commensurate to the level of challenge that you took up along the way. And if their challenge, though it was different, it did not measure up to the challenge that you faced, then their reward is what it is. It's commensurate to the level of challenge that they overcame.
Call it whatever you want, whether it's, and I'm sure I have some friends that attended Harvard. They would look at me and say, dude, your MBA is not nearly as what my MBA from Harvard is. Well, I would, you're right. Fine. Although we studied the same books, but yes, the point is, I think the overall point is it's about risk. And we too many of us go through our lives and try to avoid the risk to get the result. The thing is, in so many times, it's not about the destination. It is absolutely the journey. And I'll certainly tell you that about my experience in Alaska. My greatest experiences in the backcountry of Alaska have most been hunting trips. And some of the greatest ones were when we were not successful in achieving, in a hunting victory. In other words, taking down a moose or whatever. Right. But those were the trip itself was the reward, the risk and the experience and the camaraderie and the stories to tell later. That is the reward. And that only comes with risk.
So it's interesting because I think that a lot of times people will go ahead and take a look at the idea of risk and look at it as if it's a binary, as if you can only be reckless or you can only be like cowardly.
Yeah, that's not it, is it? Not it at all.
No, because it's room for wisdom. Right? There's room for wisdom in assessing risk properly and making decisions with that assessment in mind. And I think you do that with stock investing. You do this with just about anything in life.
Yeah, and this investing is such a good example of risk as a whole, right? Because in any investment you look at in the stock market or Bitcoin or gold or Apple stock, every investment has a risk profile, and you've got to look at those risk profiles versus your possible returns. And in so many cases, that's not the way people think about it. It's either risk or not risky. And by the way, it's like you said, entirely risky or not risky at all. And by the way, neither one of those things exist. Everything is a risk, right? Everything that you decide to step off your sofa today, there's risk involved. We don't see it. It's a perception issue. Every time you get in your car and drive anywhere, it's a risk, right? It's why we put on a seatbelt. Unlike, my father and his father, who drove with a beer in one hand and one hand out of the window, right? And we were in the back of the truck. Their perception of risk was very, very different from ours, right? Every time you eat something you shouldn't, you risk a heart attack. And so it's just a factor of what risks you take and what risks you're willing to take. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. And so can you go ahead and talk a little bit about how stepping up incrementally in risk is part of the natural journey of most men that
it goes
as they come into maturity?
Yeah, when I was quite shy when I was younger, right? And I didn't have that confidence level. So, here in talking to girls, if you're a young man watching this and you're single, talking to girls is a major risk emotionally, especially today, because our young women are not taught to have respect and appreciation for a man that has the guts to approach her and say hello and be polite and get to know her and then possibly ask her out. And the frustration, like I said, I've got 5 sisters, so I've heard this over and over again through the years. But I've heard it through, and my wife as a registered nurse is surrounded by mostly women, and they all lament the fact that they couldn't get hit on to save their lives. And it's because of something about our culture today. And so men are afraid to approach women because they're terrified of being accused of something inappropriate that'll damage them forever, right? So we thought online dating was going to be better. Well, that doesn't work out so well either. So it takes an understanding of risk to accept the fact that, you know what's the worst thing she's going to do is say no thanks. Nice to meet you. That's not horrible. That's not a terrible thing to be declined, to be turned down. I think if a young man came to me and said, Bennett, how do I learn to have more confidence? I would say, go get a sales job. And you're going to ask people to buy something 100 times a day, and 99 of them are going to tell you no. And that is going to eventually, it's going to build a thick skin over you to understand that it's not personal, it's not an insult, and be okay with it. And then from there, you move forward to taking bigger risks, like investing in real estate or starting a business, and you're going to fail. But each one of those failures, if you recover from them, you will be like, well, it's like falling down, right? It's like, well, that didn't hurt so bad. I can do that again. Fair enough.
Yeah. And I think it just depends on your context, right? So I'm going to go ahead and push back just a little bit on something that you had said earlier, is that if it was true that the worst that anybody can say when a man asks a woman that is no, then I would think that we would have a lot more men that were willing to shoot their shot. I think that in our current culture,
if that were the worst.
I would say that is no longer the case. I would say that if you are in like the bottom 50% of men, and then you're trying to go ahead and ask a woman out, and they can go ahead and look at you as a creep and go ahead and put you on the internet and ruin your reputation and all of that. And so my encouragement to men would be to go ahead and build themselves up first so that they can go ahead and take the pick of the litter. I think that is,
I like that.
I think it's the better strategy. One illustration that I go ahead and tend to use for the dating market as a metaphor, I borrowed it from Dr. Orion Taraban in his book, The Value of Others. And he goes ahead and likens the sexual marketplace to a dock where there are captains with their boats that are soliciting for passengers for passage. And those are typically men. And then the women are the passengers. So the captain has three fundamental challenges. They are to build a boat, to learn to sail, and to plot a course. Now, on the passenger side, they have three fundamental prerogatives. They're not required. They are optional by their very nature. She's allowed to test the captain, inspect the boat, and examine the itinerary. Now, if you notice that those two sets of challenges and prerogatives are complementary by nature. The prerogative on the part of the passenger is the source of the challenge for the captain. Now, just a really quick summary of what makes a captain. Building a boat is to have an emotionally compelling lifestyle. So what do you have? Who are you? What do you offer? Those are the things that are both intrinsic and extrinsic that a woman can go ahead and see when you are propositioning her for a date. Things like how to go ahead and sail are things like, how do you navigate the ship in stormy waters? Are you a consolidated man that is confident in yourself and can go ahead and stand up to the storms of life? Because if you can't stand up to a woman in her tirades, she can't have confidence that you will stand up to the challenges of life. And third, having to plot a course is the idea of you have a direction in life, you have goals, you have something greater than yourself that you go ahead and aspire to. And those three things, when combined, are incredibly compelling to women at a core level. And when you build those things up, it makes it very irresistible to most women that are looking for a high quality man.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I love that. It's all very good. I love that analogy. And the one really, if I could draw anything out of that, it's if you want to achieve something, in this case, if you want to find a date, put yourselves in that other person's shoes. It's not just, this topic is about risk. It's not just risky for you. It's risky for her. Absolutely. Remember that if you're a grown man, you are infinitely more powerful than her. And if she has to totally trust you and take a real leap of faith to go into private settings with you, whether it's a dinner table or, as the relationship progresses into your home or otherwise. And at any point in time, you are physically able of just completely taking her down. Right. And you have to remember that. And I see my wife, like that all the time. My wife's tiny, and I have to watch how I move and what I do because it scares her sometimes, freaks her out. And I realized, gosh, if I was 5'4" and 120 pounds and I had this big ape around all the time, it would be intimidating and fearful, and in some ways safe, because I know he will take other apes out. But remember that one of the value things about taking a job in sales is exactly that. It demands that you put yourself in the other person's shoes. It's not just you taking a risk when they say no. It's them taking a risk that you're trustworthy, that your product is good, that you say what you're going to do, that it's worth their time and their money.
Right.
And you learn quickly how to communicate with other people, to use their language, to understand their problems, and understand. The more you do things like that, the more you understand it's not about you.
Yeah.
And that will help you tremendously in the dating world, in the business world, in your goals, what you want next. Because ultimately, if you want to become successful at anything, find a problem that someone else has, carry their cross for them, solve their problem. And whatever risk is involved in that will be greatly diminished when you do that, because they will come back to you, say, won't you please carry this cross again?
Right. And I find that in life, that as men, we are compensated based on the level of problems that we solve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. So, yeah. That's right. Hey, so Chad's leaving us. Chad Dizzle, thank you so much for joining us. Please come back. We're going to do many more of these, and we appreciate you being here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go ahead and wrap up the idea of risk and move on to commitment. I think that one thing that you really put out there was the idea of how there's a big size differential between your wife and yourself. And there is a bit of a risk that she takes on a daily basis. But on the flip side of that coin, that is also part of the excitement that you provide to your wife.
I think so.
I think so, right?
Yeah,
because
I think so.
not only are you a big imposing ape that you can go ahead and handle yourself when things come your way, that is a comfort and a joy for her as well.
It is. It's a safety factor.
We go ahead and step into this. I often talk to my wife about the idea that women have a security gland that throbs depending on what's going on around them. And so by being a big, imposing, loving, and justly strong man, you provide so much safety and security to her that it's easy to fall into her feminine frame while you get to go and operate in your masculine frame.
Yeah, I think that's right. Let's talk about commitment. I love the topic of commitment. It's such a big deal.
Awesome. So when I look at commitment, I think that there are several ways of looking at the topic of commitment. I would say that we can go ahead and look at commitment to values, commitment to one's mission, or commitment to individual people. I think are probably the three most common ways of looking at commitment. What values would you say are at the highest level of your commitment? Or what are you most committed to?
Off camera, you and I have talked about worldview, right? And worldview, you show me your worldview and I'll show you your future. And if you have the correct worldview, you will understand why, as an employee, you don't bail on an employer first time things get rough at work, right? If you have the correct worldview, you understand why when you sign the contract to join the military, you don't bail on that unless they release you from it, right? If you have the correct worldview as a business owner, you understand the commitment that you have to the community and to the customer. When a customer comes in and that person is not satisfied, justifiably so you don't look at them and say, it's your problem. We have your money already. So if that worldview drives your values on commitment, whether it's about you or something else, right? And that's it. If it's about you, then you're committed to you. And I never want to be in the back country with someone who's committed to themselves above all else. I never want to be in a business partnership. I don't want to buy anything from anybody that puts themselves first. And I'm certainly not interested in having a friendship with someone who's committed to themselves above all else. And so worldview. And in our case, you and I, we are Christian men. That means we serve a higher God, the creator of the universe and everything under it. And we are accountable for every decision we make one day when we leave this earth.
That's correct.
And yeah, fair enough. And that's commitment. So every commitment I make, I see it that way, that I'm not only accountable to the person I've made that commitment to, but I don't want to have to stand upstairs and explain that one day. So I do my best to keep. I'm not perfect. I've made my mistakes, and of course you have.
Of course,
But
we all have.
the commitments also come to yourself, right? When you say I want to lose 10 pounds, or what commitments am I going to have to make? Strategic planning, by the way, in the business model is all about commitment. You decide what the end result you want, and then you make commitments all the way back to where you are. Right. And so if it's to lose 10 pounds, you got to decide how you're going to lose them. Business, by the way. So I'll share with you, if anyone's watching this and you want to be a business owner one day, I'll share with you here's the great news about being an entrepreneur. You can put yourself in the top 10% of success rates by doing one thing, and that's honoring your commitment. And here's how it works. Here's the reality. 50% of all small business startups are dead at 5 years. At 9 years, 90% of all business startups are gone. And that's it. You just have to commit and find a way to stay alive through those commitments. And you will put yourself, and by the way, we know this about podcasts as well, is if you can create a certain number of podcasts, you will put yourself in, they don't have to be great. If just, you can just this amount of time, this amount of commitment, and you will put yourself in the top 10% of everybody who's ever done a podcast just by honoring. I would, they say don't quit. I would say honoring the commitments that you've made to yourself and the marketplace.
Sure. I think that the implication behind that is that you go ahead and get better incrementally as you go ahead and put in the reps and put in the effort, right? I think it isn't about like just sheer number of podcasts, but it is representative of the developments that you make along the journey to become a better podcaster through that experience. So
in a training course that you and I study for YouTube, their fundamental training is 1% improvement for every video. Well, that's a commitment, right?
Right.
It's a commitment. Yeah,
absolutely. It reminds me of Atomic Habits. Yes, it does. And it definitely answers that question. Now, what would you say commitment to people looks like compared to commitment to a vision or value? How would that be different for you?
And what would the difference be? I mean, without vision and value, what would a commitment to another person be other than an exchange of something, and what am I getting, right? If there are a couple of reasons you make commitments. You make a commitment because you want something out of it, or you make a commitment or you make a commitment because you want to give something to somebody else. Well, the problem is if you're in the wrong worldview system, the only reason you're making commitments to others is so what I can get out of it. And unfortunately, in marriages and relationships between men and women, that's what we see. From the woman's side, and I've seen this many times, is from the woman's side is he's got money, he's not real great looking, I don't really like him that much, but I'm going to live in his big house and I'm going to live up pretty well. Well, she's going to make that commitment for her own benefit and none of his. And vice versa, he'll say, like the way she looks, good enough for me. It's what's in it for me, right? As opposed to the real type of commitment that's being made in a marriage. And I think that's why so many marriages fail, because when they start this thing young in life, they have the wrong mindset of what commitments really look like. And it's not what you get, like a contract, right? A contract is what do I get and what do you get? Well, commitment is a bit different from that.
I would say that they're both complementary ideas, right? Because you can go ahead and have agreements where the fundamental terms of the agreement are structured in such a way that each person, when they are handling their side of the commitment, strives and achieves mutual benefit for their partner.
Yeah, since this is a channel called Living My Alaska and a channel called Heroes Forge, maybe we should narrow that down a little bit. When we came to Alaska, we made certain commitments about living in Alaska. And over the years, we've certainly questioned those because, man, listen, when it's -40 outside and the wind's blowing sideways and it's dark, you seriously question those commitments. But and in those moments, we remind each other why we moved here in the first place. And it doesn't take long, by the way. There are times when we leave Alaska, we go somewhere else, and we're reminded very quickly why we came here in the first place. But sometimes it's smart to have experiences that renew the why, right? It's always about start with why, right? The why. If you take care of your why, everything else takes care of itself, flows out of the why. And for a commitment, it's certainly that case. If in a commitment, if you've got your why right, then everything else. So when I go into the backcountry, I know that I'm going to be scared, cold, hungry, tired, and frustrated. But I commit to that knowing those things. And I honor that commitment through, because anytime I bail on one of those, I deeply regret it.
Sure. It's
Yeah.
like lying to yourself or breaking a promise with yourself. And
Yeah,
like,
both of those things. Yeah, absolutely. You let yourself down. You fail yourself in those situations. And that's really the big one. That's why I believe backcountry lifestyle experiences are so valuable to raising a man, and maybe even a young lady, is when you get out there, it will challenge you in ways that you will never see in any other lifestyle.
yeah.
And
I find that trauma is a necessary ingredient for men to go ahead and grow and develop. And I think that
I think so.
generally speaking, it is much to our benefit to isolate women from trauma as much as possible. Right. I think that they react to it very differently than we do, because they're much more prone to neurosis and to go ahead and have negative emotionality about a lot of things. Whereas I think that on the average, men, because of our testosterone and how it works for us, we are much more prone to be optimistic about things and our traumatic experiences. And we are much more prone to be able to go ahead and let the scars form and let that happen for us. Because if we go ahead and look at society, scars are kind of hot on guys from a woman's perspective.
Yeah.
Scars aren't particularly attractive on women from a man's perspective.
I can tell
there's
you
something to that.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's fair. I think that, I can tell you in my experience with my wife is because of her line of work, she treasures her time in the backcountry, and she completely forgets that she's cold, hungry, and uncomfortable. She treasures the serenity and the quiet and the peacefulness of the backcountry experiences. And so she embraces it. Just like Alaska, we treasure being in the backcountry of Alaska because it's so beautiful and there's solitude and there's peaceful. But we often complain about the weather until we remind each other it's because of the weather that there's not 500,000 people living here. And she says that about backcountry experiences. She said, if she jokes, if men and boys could do it, everybody would be out here. I mean, if women and boys could do this, everybody would be out here, and she's just a little lady. But my challenge, I sometimes in the backcountry of experiences like that, it's me that's falling down on the responsibilities, because I constantly worry about her safety. It's just something that's in me that I'm constantly worried about. Are you hot? Are you cold? Are you hungry? Are you okay? I ask her 100 times a day, is she okay? And she's like, stop, leave me alone. I'll let you know if I need something. And if I'm scared, I'll let you know. Right. And so and it's hard. I'm constantly watching her. I don't let her go anywhere out of my sight. And that's just me. And I just can't do it. And, but the point is that in her case, she runs to that risk and that solitude that comes with it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, it's just one of those things where I think that's unique to the nature of your relationship, where you are her protective covering and she decides how she wants to interact with that.
I think that's a good way to say that. Yeah, I like that. It's about commitment. Right, she knows that there's no way. She knows. Like, we were laying in a tent one night, middle of the night. She says, Bennett, and I'm snoring, and she's, Bennett. I said, yes, honey. There's a bear. So, is he in the tent? No. Where is he? Outside. Well, okay. It's good. As long as he's outside, honey, we're good. Just now, I didn't tell her. In the meantime, I'm slipping my 44 Magnum onto my chest under the sleeping bag because I'm terrified right now. I can hear it. I'm just pretending not to hear it because I don't want to scare her. But I told her, I said, if he comes to the tent, we'll take care of it. Otherwise, chill. She was right. And I told her, it's not a bear. She was right. It was a bear. And it was sniffing around the tent. And it could have reached and grabbed one of us like a burrito out of the sleeping bag at any point. But but she knows that I would be right in the middle of her in that danger at any point, at any time. And I have a hunch she would do the same for me, which would be a major problem. So on a side note, go ahead, please.
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I've told my wife in no uncertain terms that she's not to go ahead and get between me and danger.
Exactly. Never.
No uncertain terms that her spot is behind me and in front of the children. And that's it.
Well said.
Just like when we walk in public, we do not walk side to side. She walks slightly behind me and to my right. so that I have got, a good range of vision for everything that's around us.
That's
And
good.
so that I can go ahead and care for her
Hmm.
passively and actively if the situation arrives.
Yeah. Yeah, that's well said. Yeah, there's a lot of value in that, but it's back to that idea of commitment, right? You've made a commitment to keep her safe and to keep the family safe. And that's how you deliver on those commitments. People talk about commitments all day long. It's easy to talk about them until you have to deliver.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, by providing my side of the commitment in exercising my masculine authority as I ought
Mhm.
to in a controlled manner, then it allows her the freedom to exercise her feminine duty of submission. And a lot of people don't want to talk about that in
Mm-mm.
today's environment. They look at the idea of submission as some horrible word. And I'm just like, no, the idea is that she is willfully or enthusiastically cooperating with the
Mhm.
plan and the vision that we have going on together.
Yeah.
And far too few people recognize that sometimes setting aside your autonomy for a higher purpose is for the best for everybody around them.
Yeah. That's back to your military training, right? That's teamwork. Teamwork. It's not about you. It's about the collective. So what's the next topic?
That's the three topics. We get to go ahead and summarize it a little bit, and then we can go ahead and see if there's any other questions and then wrap it up.
Sure.
So, yeah, we talked about confidence, where I think the way that we came about is the idea of incremental challenges over time and facing them and gaining new insights as to how to prepare for higher and higher challenges inspires confidence and allows you to operate in harsher environments and bigger challenges. Does that sum it up pretty well for you?
I think so.
Okay. And then we
Yeah.
talked about risk, which is the idea of for the sake of some tangible or intangible reward, you are exposed and you have some vulnerability that goes alongside. And that oftentimes that we see risk in a financial sense with investments is probably one of the easiest way to look at it from a tangible, practical perspective without going ahead and going into the wilderness. But there's a lot of inherent risk in being in the wilderness in the first place. Just being there is risky, not to mention the various pursuits that you would go ahead and handle out there, whether it's hunting, whether it's staying the night outside, all kinds of things where you're exposed and you are vulnerable. And the intangible benefit may be just having that experience and the stories to tell about the journey along the way. And then finally, if you'd like to go ahead and sum up commitment, I think you speak very well in the realm of commitment, and you've got just so much to say and so much value.
Yeah, commitment is what we see now is people jumping from job to job to job. There was a time where a man would go to work at a factory or an employer and work there 20, 25 years to get a gold watch and retire, raise his family and provide and have enough savings. And that's no longer the case. Over the last, since World War II and then after, over the last 50 years, we've seen the lifespan of any career for any employee is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. It might disturb anyone to find out that the average career span at one place for a CEO is barely 3 years these days. And there are a lot of reasons for that. But I would argue that one of those is, and it's not the CEO's fault, entirely, it's the lack of commitment from the board of directors, from the people who operate the company, to the investors and to the CEO himself, because what they're all doing at the same time is looking at what's in it for me. And so what happens is, because the stock market, because corporations share their finances every quarter, the only thing any corporation on the stock market cares about is next 3 months numbers. Anything after that is irrelevant, because they're desperately trying to hit those numbers short term all the time, as opposed to creating a product and a service and a brand that lasts for generations to build real customer loyalty. And on the other hand, we could argue that customers have no more commitment anymore. There was a time where we had brand loyalty, where the culture of our society was, men would argue over whether Chevy or Ford was better because they were so committed. Do you remember the old, I guess this was in the 90s, tastes great, let filling, Bud, Miller Lite, just, they set up this whole culture in bars where people would drink this beer versus that beer, and they'd have them go at each other for, entertainment, not violently, but you see my point. It's my team versus your team thing.
Yeah, it's a
And
rivalry kind of thing.
oh yeah, rivalry, healthy rivalry versus otherwise, but it's about those commitments. The concept of commitment is falling apart because the worldview that drove those commitment traditions is falling off. And when you get a secular worldview that says it's all about me all the time, ye be like God, the more you put yourself as the priority to your commitments, the less success and happiness and fulfillment you will find, because it's not about you.
Yeah.
And the more go ahead.
Do you think that the lack of commitment in the modern age comes from an abundance or an overabundance of choice?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Yeah, absolutely. So I used to listen to a lot of this guy called Ravi Zacharias, and Ravi was a really gifted speaker. And Ravi said it best one time. He said exactly that. He said, and women, for example, when he was talking about women, he said, in our modern culture, women are told it's the and culture. You can be a marathon runner and a brain surgeon and a lawyer and an actress and a supermodel and a mom of 10 kids and a millionaire and, except you can be none of those.
Right.
You'd be blessed if you could pull off one really well and have a secondary.
Sure.
Right. And that says it all, because we are told we must and should and want to do everything. We end up doing nothing. And by the way, it creates a tremendous amount of anxiety through our society, and especially young men, a tremendous amount of anxiety when they realize they can't. They want to be everything and they can't.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think far too few people understand that in order to have a commitment, you need to make a decision. And at the root of the word decision is the idea of cutting off other options once a decision is made.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
When you are making a commitment to a value system or to a person, you are cutting off the alternatives. So in that way, it is
right. You should be.
That's the idea behind commitment, right? And obviously it has to do with the context under which that commitment is forged. I mean, different people have different agreements that they make within their commitments. But I think that if we're looking at standard traditional commitments that our society, though it does not go ahead and revere today, 50 years ago, we would go ahead and recognize them as the standard as far as what commitments mean and what deciding on one person and eschewing others, what that actually means.
Let's touch on that a little further. In the world of business, we have something called partnerships, right? And they're usually developed under contracts. And under a contract and a partnership, and I use the word partnership specifically here, we'll get to why. But under a partnership, it says, I give you this, you give me that until we're satisfied. And then when it doesn't work anymore, we separate. And that's it, right? Well, unfortunately, it really burns me when I hear someone say my partner.
Oh, I hate that. I hate that.
Because, right? Because this is not a business transaction, man. This is a partnership is a level of commitment, but a marriage is a different level of commitment. And every time I hear the word my partner, I think, nope. There's that, because when I hear the word partner, I hear, well, it's we're going to do each other until we get bored and then we'll separate. Well, that's God, what an awful thing to do. Unacceptable to me.
I think it's interesting because if we look at modern marriage, it is a contract that we're asking men to sign with indefinite liability. And I think that covenantal marriage between a man and a woman is probably the better way to go as a society, and is probably the ideal standard to hold up for healthy families, for a healthy society. But the way that we do it nowadays, with the default presumption of caretaking for children going with the mother a lot, and the way that men are taken to the cleaners in the court system, it makes a lot of men uncomfortable with the idea of signing up for that.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
Contract.
Yeah, it's terrifying. Absolutely.
Sure. And so I do not fault men for having things like prenuptial agreements to go ahead and make sure that their interests are aligned with their bride-to-be, so that they can go ahead and show on paper and to the court system, if stuff has to go ahead and go askew, that there is intent to go ahead and work towards each other's mutual benefit, and to delineate the process by which things would happen on the back end of a civil marriage. Whereas covenantal marriage, I think, is a completely different concept, and I think that we need to bring that back.
Yeah, and maybe some people don't know what covenantal marriage means. A covenant is a higher standard of commitment beyond a legal contract. I mean, you could call a covenant in some senses a legal contract, but that's beyond that. In our context, we're talking about holy matrimony, right? The covenant you make with the maker of the creator of the universe and everything under it, God, Jesus, in our case. And you are not only committing to each other in holy matrimony, but you're committing to that. And if you break that, you not only break it between each other, but you break it with your creator, and you're accountable for that one day. And you said something earlier that when we make a commitment, that also means we've decided to shirk out, separate ourselves from other choices. And unfortunately, too many marriages, the open marriage, for example, they don't see it that way.
Oh, that's insane.
With employers and employees, when you choose a job, you choose not to go work somewhere else. And when the employer chooses you, he chooses to give you the opportunity and the money and the trust and the investment as opposed to someone else. That commitment is a serious commitment. And we see so many businesses fail now, small businesses, because of lack of the ability to retain employees. I've had clients who've shut really good operating businesses because we can't keep employees. It's their option and their answer. And because of failing commitment structures in that situation. In the backcountry of Alaska, I'll tell you this. I've learned that every time you go in a place like the backcountry of Alaska, like a hunting trip, for example, it should be at least an unspoken commitment that you are looking after, your buddy. And that means no matter what happens out there, you don't leave without him, and vice versa. And you cover each other's butt out there. And by the way, when an opportunity comes to take the animal you've been hunting, you've got, what I've seen out of people is they get what they call in the South buck fever, and they lose all sight of the commitments and they go right after that animal. And I've seen men literally push other men down to take the shot.
Yeah. Here's a question by My Alaska that is right on where we're at. He says, isn't an open marriage similar to a company hiring a contractor?
No, it's not the same. An open marriage is not a marriage, right? When I use the word marriage, I use it as the same as holy matrimony. And that's why, if gay people want to get married, I'm fine with them developing a contract to go live together. They do what they want, but I don't believe that gay people can have something called holy matrimony because it's against the holy part, right? And so when I say marriage, there's only one kind of marriage to me, and that's called a holy matrimony. And that is with the maker, and you are committed. When a contractor ties into a company, they know there's an end date to this thing. They're providing a specific service, and that's it.
So I think I'm going to go ahead and take this question a little bit differently, right? Because I would say that when someone decides to open their marriage, right, where they had a marriage and they're trying to go ahead and open it on one side or on both sides, they are quitting their position at the company and they are seeking to be employed in a contractor capacity. Right. So they're exchanging their W-2 for a 1099. And so there's a lot of risk and a lot of reward for a 1099 in most cases. But in this case, I would say that whoever is seeking to open up the marriage is really seeking to destroy the company, is what the deal is.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's a good analogy. I mean, so anyway, that's it's a good question, Bill. I appreciate you asking that. That's Bill at My Alaska. He's got a cool YouTube channel here in Alaska, and he lives not far from me out there in the backcountry. The discussion of commitment is such a good one because we talk about all these different topics as related to commitment. So, in the backcountry, we make certain commitments to each other. But unfortunately, in so many situations, you don't really know who and what you're committing to until you're out there. Anybody can talk a good game. And like I said, at the bar, at the dinner table with some chicken wings and a beer watching hunting. It's another thing when you get out there and you find out they have no such commitment. I've seen men come to blows over who took down the animal. For example, like somebody shoots a moose, and then men start arguing, well, whose moose it is, and
Yeah, I
that
think that
turns
comes
that
from pride more than anything else.
yeah, pride and selfishness, and again the lack of commitment. What are you? It's if it's all about you, then of course you're going to claim something that's not yours and be fine with that.
Yeah, and I think that that's what's wrong in a lot of ways in our society, where
Hmm.
people want to go ahead and claim accolades that do not actually belong to them. It
Hmm.
reminds me of stuff going on with the, I don't know if you're familiar with what's going on with the government shutdown and SNAP and EBT and all
Yeah.
of that kind of stuff, where a lot of people are posting on social media that they want to go ahead and rob Walmart and they're going to go
Hmm.
ahead and just take what they want and nobody's going to stop them, as
Hmm.
if like EBT is some sort of entitlement to them, as if
Hmm.
it is something owed to them that they've earned somehow through government. And
Hmm.
to me, that entitlement is running rampant in our society, where people have failed to understand where money comes from in the first place. Right? The
Hmm.
idea of money is an IOU for services rendered or goods provided.
Yeah, one of the things we see in failures of commitment is the immediate need and the aggressive need to place the responsibility on someone else for the consequences of that commitment. And we've seen that's unfortunately why so many lawyers get so rich over husbands and wives who want to separate, because they get lawyers, and then it's all your fault, it's all his fault, it's all her fault, and then it gets nasty. And we see this in business as well. I've seen it in backcountry opportunities and hiking and other when things start to break down, when things are easy, everything's nice, fine. It's easy to keep your commitments when everything's. I've
Right.
had many. I've had the privilege of knowing many people in the military, and I've had the privilege of helping some who've been in multiple combat tours, and they were starting businesses and such after. And he they would tell me that about the military world is, listen, you go into the military. A lot of them join the military thinking this is going to be a cruise, man. We're not at war right now. And then suddenly you're required to honor when you held your right hand and you took that oath to stand in, at the line and fill that gap between the enemy and the citizens of this country, and take a bullet if you have to do it. That's a very serious commitment. And a lot of people are not prepared for that if they really had to.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. I don't see any more questions on the go ahead and on the live. Do you have any closing thoughts that you'd want to go ahead and wrap this up with?
Yeah, let's talk about the channels individually. And
Sure.
well, I'd love to hear a little bit more about why you started, Heroes Forge. I mean, really, what's behind it? I can tell you, we started Living My Alaska to reach out to people, and we video these things, we video our life to share it with other people, to show people this is the reality of what you're getting yourself into, and I hope to inspire people to see a different kind of life. And I've said before, if your necktie is choking you, if you're stuck in a traffic jam today, and you're wondering if there's a different way to live, if you're wondering what it's like to taste salmon straight out of a fresh stream and hear the wind blowing through -40 temperatures, if you want to know what it's like to get up and close with a grizzly bear, there's only one way to do it, and that's to go do it. And that's true throughout life. Whatever you want to go do. If you don't want to go live in the backcountry of Alaska, I understand that. That's just how we manifested our dreams. But accept the fact that where you are now is, if you're unhappy, and many people are happy and good, but if you're unhappy where you are, accept the fact that it's going to be uncomfortable, it's going to be painful, it's going to be risky, it's going to require commitment. And if you're a man listening to this, it's going to require you dreaming the dream, delivering that dream, and then leading your family, your wife, your friends, whoever, out of where you are into the dream. And that's very risky, and it requires a lot of courage, but faith. If you have the faith, the courage comes easy. If you don't have the faith, you'll never find the courage, the real adequate courage to do anything, much of anything. Your faith comes first.
Absolutely. So true.
Mhm.
So true. I'll tell you a little bit about why I do what I do. And the idea is I grew up in a single family household, and I know that there are many young men that have done the same. They have grown up without a father in their home, without adequate masculine authority around them, because I recognize that mothers, as much as they would try, it is difficult for women to raise men, and that
Mm.
men
Yes, it is.
raise men,
Mhm.
and that men provide adequate challenges And I think that in times past and in societies before, that we had many rites of passage that would be put together by men of a society to go ahead and introduce a young man into becoming a man as he goes ahead and faces off against various trials that were established by the society or by that group of men, who then place their stamp on that young man and say, he is part of our tribe. He belongs to us. And having that mark of acceptance and that mark of togetherness are things that once bound societies, and that is absent today. And so by providing pro-masculine content and to go ahead and give guidance to the young men of today, I think that I am trying to do a small part to help them where they may not have been helped in their earlier life, to find their track, to find their hero's journey.
And it takes a tremendous amount of courage to do what you're doing, isn't it? I mean, you're speaking truths that have been time-honored truths, and a lot of people don't like those. And I've watched some of your videos, and I told my wife, I said, oh boy, I'd love to see his comment section.
Yeah, absolutely. We got one from My Alaska. We got women raise babies into children. Yes. Men raise children into adults. I totally agree. I think that conceptually, I think you're going along with something that I talk about often on my channel, is the idea that once a child gets to about 6 years old, that's kind of like where the mothering can go ahead and be dialed back, and where the fathering needs to step up, where a man can go ahead and take a child into adulthood so that they can go ahead and learn how to integrate properly into the society around us.
Mike, I imagine, in my mind, I imagine you're going to have 250 women named Karen tell you how you're a bigoted, ignorant human being and the rest of it. And you're okay with that, right?
I'm totally fine with this. So here's the deal, is that my wife and I have a wonderful marriage of over 20 years, and we've got 4 beautiful children, and we still like each other. And that is a good thing. I think that there are far too many people that go ahead and live lives of boring mediocrity where we like each other a lot. And even after 20 years of marriage, we are still passionately in love with one another. And we go ahead and gross our kids out. And that is a wonderful thing. If you're not grossing your kids out, they don't have an example of what love should look like in a marriage, even a seasoned and mature marriage.
But that was not an accident, right? It's a blessing, but it wasn't an accident. It didn't just drop. Your 20-year marriage didn't just drop in your lap just because. You didn't get lucky. I mean, there were certain steps, certain value systems, certain foundations, way back to when you started courting the lady that you became your wife. It started there, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting because I talk about the captain and the passenger a lot on my channel. And at the time when we met, I was not a full-fledged captain. I was nothing really. And she saw that I had values, and I was willing to go ahead and be committed to a process of creating something from nothing, which is something that was relatively rare in my generation, to be willing to take the raw elements from nature and create something of value. And I just knew that that was the fundamental piece of the puzzle to create something of value for society and for my fellow man. And just even something simple like that very concept, and being willing to commit myself to something greater than myself, was something that set me apart from a lot of our peers at the time.
I can tell you that one of the greatest things we did and why was moving to the backcountry of a place like Alaska, but I can tell you why. When we moved there, we were complete strangers. Well, let's start with Switzerland. When we moved to the Alps, the Swiss Alps, we don't speak German. We had no idea. We had never lived in a snowy environment before. We had to talk to each other because we had no one else to talk to. No one spoke, we don't speak German. And we had to lean on each other tremendously. Then we left Switzerland and we moved to Alaska. It was the same situation, but a lot bigger, because we were moving to the backcountry, and our safety and our security and our survival meant we had to really depend on each other. And when you're in situations where you're in danger, suddenly you become a lot more humble. And certainly, at least for me, and that is one of the things that has strengthened our marriage greatly, because there was such little of a safety net. Is we had to make this work, and we blossomed in that environment, and we really did well. And so one of the things that when we lived in Albuquerque for a while, we used to go cycling with a bunch of old physicists from the nuclear lab out there, and they always said, Bennett, you need to ride a tandem bicycle. Why? Because he says, if you want to see where your marriage is headed, a tandem bicycle will speed it to its end. And it's it's very true. If you want to see where your marriage is headed, go ride a tandem bicycle around West Texas. And by the way, if anyone thinks Texas is flat, no, it's not. Go ride a tandem bicycle in 75 miles a day for a week on end in 95-degree heat, and let's see how you're doing in your marriage. And if you can survive that, you're in good shape.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because that reminds me of the idea that I often talk about on my channel, is that it is a man's responsibility to maintain the course of the relationship, because when you take your hand on the wheel and you succumb to passivity, like Adam did to Eve in the garden, that when, generally speaking, when a woman takes the helm, she'll go ahead and direct the ship to the end of the relationship.
That I didn't know. That's a hard reality, isn't it? Hey, where can people find you online?
Oh, absolutely. So I've got the Heroes Forge is my username on pretty much every social media. If you liked what you heard, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. We're going to go ahead and hit the collab buttons after this, so that all of my people can go ahead and see Bennett and his wonderful work. And hopefully some of Bennett's folks will go ahead and see some value in what I do.
I'm so honored that you joined me, Mike. I'm just thrilled that you did it. I thank you so much. You're clearly a professional. You've got an amazing setup over there, and we're going to do more of these. And I hope if you're watching this right now and you want to know more, reach out to Mike, reach out to me. Let us know what you want to see on the next episode. Or if you're watching this video, leave a comment for us. Tell us what questions you have. And if you think we're ignorant, bigoted, racist, whatever, and your name's Karen, go ahead, Karen. We want to hear from you too. It's okay. It helps our logarithm. It's positive or negative. YouTube doesn't care. So Mike, thank you so much. Folks, go check out the Heroes Forward, and you've been watching Living My Alaska live stream. Check out my next video. It's coming up right now.
Sounds great. Have a fantastic day, everybody. Good to see you.